Mhm. I want to pick up on a couple of things that you've just mentioned. So you said that the patient selection is one of the, if not the most important thing. I know that you've traveled the world now, and you've gone to lots of different HSCT centers that are using different protocols, using rituximab and not the ATG, and treating patients that have progressive MS, and also fairly successfully. And I wondered if you've got anything to say to that. Have your views changed, or do you still think it's most suited to the relapsing remitting, which is, we should say, what STAR MS is focusing on and what the MIST trials focused on as well? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, HSCT is an immune-based therapy. It's not a neuroregenerative disease per se. You reset the immune system and the central nervous system can repair itself to a certain extent. Once it becomes secondary progressive, the ability for self-repair is pretty much vanished. The relapsing phase of the disease kind of evaporates, disappears, and you're set without new lesions in MRI or new activity, having slow neurologic degeneration. That's neurodegenerative. So this type of therapy, an immune-based therapy, HSCT, absolutely will not, let me emphasize not, NOT, work for secondary progressive MS, and those patients should not be treated with it. The risk benefit is not there. It's not going to help them. Now, there is a caveat to that, and details are important. So you just don't go one day from relapsing remitting MS the next day to secondary progressive. It's a gradual transition. And a lot of times it's hard to tell when that happens because the patient's referred to you, you haven't been following them. The outside physicians don't really make that clarification because once they're secondary progressive, there's not much they can do for them. But a lot of patients transition gradually from secondary progressive through active secondary progressive. In other words, they're still having some relapses, but they're having neurologic deterioration, but slow between the relapses. So that's active secondary progressive. And then they become just non-active secondary progressive. No more relapses, no more new MRI lesions. Non-active secondary progressive is absolutely will not help. Active secondary progressive, it will have some benefit, an improvement in EDSS by 0.5 point compared to 1 to 2 points for relapsing remitting. So yes, I would still do this in active secondary progressive. But you really have to be clear you're dealing with active secondary progressive, not non-active. And because you're going to get a different result, not as phenomenal improvement, but yes, some improvement, it really should be a different group of people, not studied together with relapsing remitting. And ideally, you want to treat relapsing remitting before it gets into secondary progressive, whether it's active or non-active.
Yes.
So yes, active secondary progressive can still benefit from this. But, you know, the problem that arises in this field is I was not a neurologist. I had to train myself in these diseases because it was my idea, first in animal models, and then reading the literature and designing the trials and sitting at everybody's bedside, which gives me a totally different picture because what's going on in medicine is everybody's in a silo. They're in their own silo. So neurologists, very bright people, dedicated, hardworking, but they don't know transplant. They don't do it. They don't know it. Hematologists that do transplant know transplant, but they do not know MS. So unfortunately, a neurologist will keep giving DMTs to their patient until they're in secondary progressive, whether it's active or non-active, and refer him to the hematologist who will then just do them. That's not what you want. You want someone that can really be translational, who understands transplant, who sits at the bedside, but understands MS, knows that disease inside and out. Then it works. Unfortunately, the way medicine's developed is you have these different silos. And the reason it developed that way is medicine was set up through the centuries based on what we could see. So, you know, you could see the skin, so there's dermatologists. At autopsy, you could see the brain and the spinal cord, so there's neurologists. You could see the heart, there's cardiologists, the lungs, the kidney, you know, nephrologists, so forth. Nobody could see cells. Nobody had a microscope. So there was no disease based on immune cells. Eventually, with microscopes and an understanding of lymphocytes, that lymphocytes cause autoimmune disease, there arose immunology departments that do basic research, but the clinical care of patients with the different diseases caused by those immune cells had already been established to a variety of different divisions and departments that have their own fiefdoms. There is no autoimmune institute or department where this could fall under, where people are board certified for autoimmune diseases and clinically treat just autoimmune diseases like they would in hematology or oncology. That would really benefit this field. So it's why people don't cross translationally between silos. If you do it, you can achieve a lot of things, but it's a very difficult jump. And then there's a lot of resistance between the different silos because their eyes are seeing different things.
I think
so
that's really
so patient selection is absolute key, but the second absolute key is the regimen. Okay. In cancer, there's this concept from transplanters, the more aggressive the regimen, blow everything up, the better, because if there's one malignant cell survive, you could restart the neoplasm. And I originally was a transplanter for leukemia before I gave all of this up decades ago to develop autoimmune disease. In autoimmune disease, it's not that way. It's balance. You just need to knock it down enough and reset the balance. And so you need a regimen that's strong enough, but not too strong. So like in my lay book that comes out, the comparison I make is for astronomers looking for planets that life can exist on, now that they're discovering planets in all these solar systems out there in the galaxy. And the key is the habitable zone. If the planet's too close to the sun, there's no life. If it's too far away, it's no life. It's the habitable zone. It's the same with choosing your conditioning regimen. You have to get it just right. Not too weak, not too strong. That's the key. That's why it's so important. And that conditioning regimen is going to vary by disease. Just like the habitable zone in astronomy, looking at solar systems, varies by the star. If you have a big blue star, the habitable zone is much further away. If you have a little white dwarf, it has to be, or a red star, it has to be much closer. A yellow star, a medium-sized star like our star, it's more in the middle. So you have to design your regimen for a given autoimmune disease. So those things are very clear. There are other subtle things like experience is really, really important, because you can kind of anticipate, potential problems, especially experience with the regimen and with that disease. That's super important. So, but obviously a lot of centers will have to start without experience. They gain experience while they're running through the protocol, but experience is definitely
exactly. I think that's probably
center effect.
Yeah.
Even within conditioning regimens, if you use a non-myeloablative like me, if you increase the ATG dose too high, like some centers do, you're going to get Epstein-Barr virus and PTLD. You're going to get all kinds of problems and extra treatment that you have to give patients and extra monitoring, which you don't need to do.